If we were to establish at least one of the major themes of our Judeo-Christian story and summarize it with one word, I would like to suggest to you today that among them would be the word hope. And if our world needs a word to hear today on this first Sunday after Christmas, it is a message of hope, that things can be different, that things can be better, that the world can be a better and more loving and generous place, and that we can be more kind and tolerant and loving with each other. Great hope and promise is outlined in the creation narrative. That God created and brought us into being is itself a word of hope, an indication of hope. God did not want to exist alone, but in relationship. And so we were created for each other, to be in community and to care for each other. After God's great frustration with creation and the floodwaters, there comes a promise from God found in a rainbow. Hope found in a rainbow. Never again will flood destroy God's creation. It's a covenant between God and the earth, between God and humanity, and is a sign, some say, of God's eternal reconciliation and love. Hope found in eternal reconciliation and love. At 99 years old, Abraham received word from God that his faithfulness would be rewarded with descendants that would be too numerous to count. His would be a legacy of life and faith. And so to this old man who thought that with his end would be the end of his life and legacy, this hope that Abraham would go on, and so would his example of faith and commitment and solidarity to God. After destruction and loss, after occupation and oppression, various prophets announce that the people of God will be redeemed and released, that the people of God will be set free, that God's people will return to their homes and to their homeland. The prophet Isaiah proclaims, "Prepare the way of the Lord. Prepare the way of the Lord in the wilderness or desert. Make straight a highway for our God. Every valley shall be lifted up, and every mountain and hill be made low. The uneven ground shall become smooth, and the rugged places plain. And the glory of the Lord will be revealed, and all humanity will see it together, for the mouth of the Lord has spoken." God's conquered and exiled people will one day return to their homes and homeland hope. Other prophets announce a hope centered in a way of life that is pleasing to God, that God's people, that all people might live in a way that will make the earth and its people more just and kind. Let justice roll down like waters, and righteousness, right living, like an ever-flowing stream. What does the Lord require of you but to do justice, to love kindness, and to walk humbly with your God? If we live this way, there is hope for the world, hope for humanity, hope for community, hope between people. Another hope springs eternal in our sacred story. The author of Deuteronomy reminds us in difficult times that the eternal God is our dwelling place, and that underneath are the everlasting arms. Oh, in times of trouble, how I have turned to that passage of Scripture again and again. Underneath me and all of it are the everlasting arms. The psalmist speaks words of hope as well again and again. Here are just a few of my favorites. Psalm 121, I lift my eyes to the hills. From where does my help come? My help comes from the Lord who made heaven and earth. How many times we have recited those together in unison at numerous celebrations of life, at memorial services in this very meeting house, this very sanctuary, celebrating the life and faith of dear saints who have passed on. It's a favorite to many families. I lift up my eyes. From where does my help come in this deep and desperate time of need, when I am grieving and enduring such loss? My help comes from the Lord. In Psalm 139, for those of us who have a tendency to wander off and go astray from time to time, to become self-absorbed and not so interested in God or God's will or way, when we struggle with doubt or confusion, or when we wonder if we believe at all, when our prayer life is non-existent, the psalmist in 139 says, where can I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? If I climb the highest mountain, you are there. If I descend to the lowest valley, you are there. If I go to the farthest point of the earth, you are even there. And the most beautiful part of this passage, those first 18 verses of Psalm 139, again, that we have read numerous times together, the most beautiful part of that passage, I come to the end, and I am still with you. There's hope that a Messiah will come. It's pervasive through the entire Judeo-Christian narrative. But in the Jewish Testament, in the Hebrew Testament, the understanding of Messiah is a bit different from the Messiah that you and I know. It was a political Messiah, a militaristic Messiah who would redeem and save God's people from occupation and oppression and restore Israel to its golden age and glory. And yet Isaiah, that we turn to often to point to Jesus, correctly or incorrectly using that text, Isaiah tries to paint a different picture for all of us through the centuries by saying that for to us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulder, and his name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Again, Isaiah tries to paint a different picture about how things will be when the glory of God is truly revealed and humanity lives as it should, when a Messiah comes and sets things right. The wolf also shall dwell with the lamb, Isaiah writes. The leopard shall lie down with the young goat, the calf and the young lion and the fatling together, and a little child shall lead them. Indeed, the one who we call Savior and King was not born of earthly power or royal blood, but to two unwed people who left their home. In one story, because a census was being taken, and in another story, because Joseph is embarrassed about their situation. So say that they go to Bethlehem to be counted, or say that they go to Bethlehem in order to escape the scrutiny of their brothers and sisters in Nazareth. And this unwed couple, they gave birth to their child in a barn and laid him in a feeding trough. There was no palace, no golden crib, no fancy robes or golden rings, no military ever at his beck and call. Oh, a star announced his arrival, and wise people from the east who were prone to watch the stars knew that something amazing and magnificent and wonderful had happened. And so they too went to Bethlehem to see this baby not born in a palace or lying in a golden crib, but who was in a barn and resting quietly in a feeding trough. No, his kingdom would not be of this world. That was clear from the very beginning. But as he rode into Jerusalem on that white colt, he made it clear for the world and for all of us and for all who might believe in him that his would be a kingdom of peace and servanthood. When he was arrested, Simon Peter took out his sword and cut off the ear of the high priest's servant Malchus. And Jesus told Peter to put away his sword, and he healed Malchus. His was a kingdom of peace and servanthood. I'll take a few steps back from that night in the garden, though, and we'll catch a glimpse of why Jesus was arrested and tried and executed. His kingdom was so different from the kingdoms of the world. As Jesus rode into Jerusalem, on one side, on a white colt symbolizing peace and servanthood, Rome's army came in the other way with all of its might and all of its power and all of its oppressive armor and capability. And Jesus came in as the Prince of Peace and servant of all. And he said, love one another, forgive one another. Give a cup of cold water to those who are thirsty. Visit those who are in prison. Feed those who are hungry. Clothe those who are naked. Care for those who are sick. Provide shelter for those who are homeless. Love one another because love is from God. Do all of those things, Jesus said, and it will be as if you're doing them for me. And if doing them for me, doing them for your God. And if doing them for God, then there's hope for the world. And fast forward to that day when he hung upon a cross, not because he was a criminal or had done anything wrong, but because the powers that be feared him. They feared that they would lose control, not to a political figure or to a man with military power at his beck and call. But they feared that they would lose their power and their position and their privilege, that the status quo would be wiped away, not by any military might, but because the people would rise up with love and insist on justice and be people of peace. That they would keep making the circle bigger and bigger and bigger, welcoming all, forgiving all, including all. And they knew that if they did not stop that movement of love and justice and peace and inclusivity, that their days were numbered. And so they had a witch hunt. They had a sham trial. And they nailed him to a cross. And even from that vantage point, he looked out to those who were harming him and to everyone else. And again, his words were so unexpected. Forgive them, for they know not what they do. And then that morning, when all seemed lost, and the brave women, the only brave people in the Easter narrative are the women, by the way, they dare to travel in the darkness and to go around the powers that be that are still making sure that things are kept calm and that everyone is in order. The women go to the tomb to anoint the body of Jesus, to prepare it for burial, and the tomb is empty. And everyone leaves but Mary. And she thinks she's talking to a gardener. Everything seems lost at that moment. Everything seems to have vanished. All the excitement and joy of being with Jesus and following Jesus and being a disciple of Jesus, their hope for the world, it was all devastatingly lost. And this man, who she's supposed to be a gardener, said, "Why are you crying?" And she said, "They've killed my friend Jesus. And all of my hopes and dreams for a better humanity, for a better world, for a better life are gone." And this one, who she supposed to be a gardener, turned to her and said, "Mary." Spoke one little word, "Mary." And she spoke one word in reply. And with it, Easter began, and hope springs eternal. She responded with Rabboni, teacher. And that little band of believers became a movement. It became an institution and has been handed down to us. And all of that hope is handed to us today. And it's as if we are being asked on this first Sunday after Christmas, as we read the whole narrative and sing our carols, it's as if we are being asked, will you be people of hope? Will you live hope? Will you help humanity to be as God desires humanity to be and the world to be? The question before us this day and every day really is simple. Will you be people of hope? I pray that we will. And if we will, there is indeed hope for humanity and hope for the world. Oh, thanks and praise be to God for the gift of our Judeo-Christian faith and for a story of hope.